Welcome to this interview. My name is Sun. I'm assuming your name is Mother.
Correct.
Okay. So let's go back to the 1960s, specifically 1968. Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit of table setting here. So we've got the unpopularity of the Vietnam War, and that's influenced by media coverage. There's a lot of horrific imagery that people were seeing for the first time, and I think that influenced a lot of people's attitudes about that. LBJ announcing that he's not going to run for re-election. Martin Luther King being assassinated.
I remember that well.
In Memphis, yeah. And in June, you've got Robert Kennedy being assassinated as well. Violence breaking out between protesters and authorities at the Democratic National Convention. You've got Richard Nixon ascending to the presidency of the United States, and of course we know how that story ended as well. Take me back to a Black religious family living in the South. Can you talk about how any of these things, if any of them, impacted your family in terms of decisions or sense of safety? What was it like for your family?
Actually, it was more with the older members of the family that was more afraid of what could happen or what was going on or what you shouldn't say or where you shouldn't go, as opposed to the younger people. That's because they basically tried to shield us from a lot of stuff because we didn't go places. We were home a lot. So a lot of things that was going on, you didn't see. Because, a lot of families didn't have TVs or whatever. And so you weren't exposed to a lot of things that was going on. And they tried to shield you from that. But on the same token, they wanted you to understand you need to be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't ride the city bus for fear of having to have the kids spit on us and having to fight and that kind of stuff. So we never rode the city bus and we didn't walk places, and she made sure that wherever we went, somebody took us, in the family or whatever, or we didn't go. And basically, because everything was segregated back then, you basically kind of stayed with your own. And so unless you ran into a situation where you had the races mixed, you didn't really run into that. Because, we had our own schools, so we had our own football games, we had our own basketball games, we had our, certain things we weren't entitled to because you didn't get. I mean, a lot of kids talk about how they grew up having to take swim classes in high school or in elementary school. We didn't have access to a pool. We had access to community pools when I was, a certain age. But as far as having pools at home and having pools in school, we didn't have stuff like that. So you didn't have like a mixing. So we kind of grew up in a euphoric kind of thing as far as the kids themselves were concerned. We was in our own, free world, music, everybody loved everybody, we just got along, this, that, and whatever, and, it wasn't so much the white-black thing until you got introduced to the real world. That was when you really felt what your parents were trying to tell you, be afraid of the boogeyman because he's out there.
When I mentioned Martin Luther King, you mentioned that that's something that you really remember. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, because my grandmother loved Martin Luther King. In fact, when he came to Greenville, South Carolina to speak his I Have a Dream speech, she actually had a heart attack at the speech and had to be carried out on an ambulance. That was the first thing I remember. And the biggest thing I remember was when he was assassinated. I was in college. That was my freshman year at college. And the kids were rioting and marching and, because they were outraged. I mean, and people were just tired. They were sick and tired of being tired. Students had gotten killed at some of the other universities, and there was a lot of unrest going on. And so he was like, to us, the godfather of us, let me so speak. He wasn't so like a militant, but he was like a calming voice in the void, that people could listen to and could relate to and could have hope in. Because, he gave people a dream, you know what I'm saying? So for them to assassinate him, it was just unreal. I was in college, and it just got horrible. I remember my mom calling me on the phone saying, "We got you a ticket, go get on the bus and come home." And they were looting and rioting or whatever. And we was marching, from downtown. We marched downtown with caskets for Martin Luther King and for the students that got killed at Kent State. All that happened around the same time. So it was that kind of thing. And of course, we had the Black Panthers that came on my campus at A&T. It's one of the biggest HBUC. So it was the National Guard was there. It was just a big thing, In fact, they had to shut school down for the rest of the year. So that was my freshman year. So it was wild.
Would you say that the anger of the moment was greater than any fear that you had?
It was, yeah. That's what motivated people to do stuff like we had the incident where they had the Nazis come in and they had the people that they could say that were a part of the group, and they had the killing over at Smith Homes, and the police was told not to come over there. And I knew some black police officers, and they were saying that their superiors had told them to stay in the gym, not to come out, and they had a lot of people to get killed. Some kind of political party was backing something or what. It was a mess. Smith Homes was just terrible. They were tear gassing people in their homes, and people were getting killed, black and white. But it was awful. It was a mess, and it was bad because you were actually finally seeing the government for what it really was. It was like they were no longer being undercover about how they felt about racism and whatever. And we was at such an age that we were ready to fight instead of just being always stepped on. And we really didn't know what stepped on meant. Not really. We was just getting a taste of it. But it was just the fact that we were just sick and tired of being sick and tired. So they were ready to fight. I mean, it was just bad. It was bad.
One more follow-up question. You described not really seeing what the boogeyman was that your parents were protecting you from until you got into the real world.
Right.
Were you shocked?
Well, somewhat. Not because I didn't believe that it was true, but it was the kind of thing like, how could God let something like that go on? How could one man think so less of another man just because of the color of his skin? How can people just spit on you and lynch you from trees and kill your family? And I'm just like, how could that exist? It's just it's just hard to grasp that something like that could actually happen. And people really felt the anger that they portrayed. They really felt that way. When they say they hated you, they meant they hated you. And it was nothing you could say or do that could turn that around. And you had to face that fact. It was either that or be killed.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your relationship with my father. Like how you met him. And
My mother was very strict when I was coming up. I had one brother, no sisters. And I guess it was because of the way she was raised. They raised people, their children, with fear and intimidation. Don't do. This will happen, never, don't, whatever. So, and of course, children, being children, we always want to do what people tell you not to do. You know that. So, I didn't really go out a lot back then because I wasn't really allowed to. I went to a Catholic school for a long time. So I went to a lot of what they considered as sanctioned parties. The nuns were there, the priest was there, some of the parents were there. Everything was shown for. As I got older and got in high school, I was a cheerleader, so I started going to the football games and stuff like that. And you eventually kind of mingle in with other people. And your father played on a band. These were things that I wasn't accustomed to because I wasn't exposed to that. He was very popular. He was very popular with a lot of females. He was very popular. And I was very insecure about my own self, so I never really put myself out there. When I got old enough to go to places like that with my girlfriends. I would be there, but I would just be there. What attracted me to him was he approached me. And I guess it's because I wasn't approaching him. But I didn't know how to approach him, but I don't think he knew that, you know? So, and I'm thinking, out of all the women up in here, why is he coming talking to me? Well, I found out later on it's because I wasn't running over there trying to talk to him. That's how I met him. We were friends. I was a lifeguard in the Y. He would come over to the Y when we have free swimming periods, and they would swim, and I'd see him at the club, and I don't really know how we finally tangled up, but we finally did decide that we would date. I was getting ready to go to college. We dated that whole year before I went to college, and when I came to North Carolina, to A&T, to school, he used to call me, write me, come to visit, come pick me up for holidays, take me home, bring me back to school, that kind of stuff, and one thing just led to another, you know, not being street smarts. It just happened. Of course, that was another whole battle I had to go through because I just knew my mom was going to die or kill me, one or the other. I did it for a while till I couldn't. And she was saying, well, we need to do something. And I was like, well, I don't know what you want me to do, but I'm not doing that. I knew what that was. I'm not doing that. I respected the fact that I used to be very afraid of my mom, but I respected the fact that she was willing to accept whatever it was that I wanted to do without giving me a hard time about it. Because I was like, you know, because she kept saying, well, you can't take care of it. I mean, I knew I couldn't. But I was like, you know, maybe somebody else can do a better job. You know, at least give them a chance, you know, as opposed to just flushing them. I just couldn't do that. I can't really say it was so much the religious aspect, even though I was raised religious, because my mom was Catholic and I went to church with her every Sunday. And my father and my grandmother were Baptist, and I also went to church with them every Sunday. So I went to 2 churches every Sunday. And yes, I knew a lot about God and the Bible and all that kind of stuff, but I was a child, you know. So I knew about it, but saying it meant anything or it kind of had an impact on me, if it did, it was deep rooted and I didn't really know it. Mm-hmm. I just knew there's a difference between right and wrong. I was raised with that kind of instinct, so I was like, to me that's wrong, I can't do that. So I can't say it was the religious aspect. And then later on in life, I'm thinking that maybe it might have been, you know, because they say the Holy Spirit is with you even when you don't know it, you know, so. Could have been, but whatever it was, I just felt like it was a better decision to bear my child than it is to dispose of him. I just wasn't going to do that.
So it sounds like even though initially her first thought was that you needed to have an abortion, she respected the fact that you didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And that shocked me, to tell the truth, because my mom was very stern. I mean, very stern. So that really shocked me, and I thought, well, okay. Something is changing here. You know, I know I was in college, you know, and I was considered legally grown, really, to tell the truth, even though I knew nothing about life. And I could have went out and probably got a job flipping burgers or something like that or whatever, you know, and I knew she wanted a better life for me and I wanted a better life for myself. And I was just not ready for the world that way, you know. So, but I did realize that something was different. So I thought, well, okay. And she never really spoke about it again. Never.
Interesting.
She never spoke about it again.
Did anybody else in the family know at that time besides you two?
My crazy cousin, Shirley, that lived in New Hampshire, where you were born. Her husband was stationed at the Air Force Base there. She knew. And of course, she didn't say anything for a long time, but we always had issues and I never understood why. Because she was, to me, like the sister I never had. But she's the kind that would, you turn your back and she'd put a knife in it. So she, on occasion, would throw out that I had a daughter to people out there in the world, you know. And I would hear these stories coming back and all I would say was, no, I don't have a daughter. Which was the truth.
Which is 100%
yeah,
true.
I don't have a daughter. You know, this is what I heard. So she even told Skeeter when he was little, and I didn't find this out till much, much later when Skeeter was grown. And she was making comments about, well, your mom thinks she all that, this and that, whatever, but she's got a daughter out there, and da-da. And he was like, you better quit telling stories about my mom. You know, he was real upset about it, and he had a lot of anger issues behind it, but I didn't find out till later that was going on. And my thing with her was, why would you talk to a child about that? If you had issues, you could have come to me, you know, and we could straighten that out. He was, what, 8, 10? What is he supposed to do other than defend his mama? Because everybody think you crazy anyway. You know what I'm saying? It was just unbelievable. She, to this day, still think you a girl, even though some of the other family members know about you, because I've introduced you to everybody. Her sisters, they've all seen your pictures, you know, and I've told everybody we have a relationship. It's been that way for years. We've been on trips together. We visited each other, whatever. And I said, bam, this is y'all's cousin. This is my oldest son. You need to meet him. Whatever. So she called, she was like, well, Vaughn got, they was like, no, Cheryl, she doesn't have a daughter. She has a son. And she knows it, you know. And she was like, what? She was like, yeah, she knows it. You know, he's in her life. They ain't each other's life. She was like, but she told me it was a girl. Now, how did I tell her that? I don't get it. People are crazy. I mean, we have enough to deal with without all this people making up stuff. So I was like, anyway, I let them know you were officially well, you're a man now, but I let them know you were not a female. And yes, you were my son, and you were my oldest son. And the hardest part was telling your brothers, you know. Because I know Skeeter already had issues anyway, but he was such a surprise to me because it was the best thing that ever happened to him to find out he had an older brother. It just made his world just 360-degree turn to a better world. He loved it. He absolutely loved it. I wasn't so sure about it. But he turned out okay too. How did you feel? You know, because it was new to you too.
Yeah.
Plus I was hearing stuff in my ear like, well, he doesn't really know about love, and he might think he love you, but he don't really know that, and you don't really know how he was raised. And I was like, thinking to myself, I said, well, we talk, you know, and he tells me stuff, and I'm assuming you telling me the truth. And if it was anything that bad, I'm sure you would tell me, you know. And I said, well, I don't know. I didn't know what to think at that point. So I just kind of shut down a little bit. But I mean, it seemed to be okay to me.
Yeah, and we did talk through that. You know, there was stuff about my upbringing that I wanted to share with you, but I made a conscious decision that it wasn't going to be our icebreaker. It seemed to make more sense to have those types of conversations after we established what type of a relationship we were going to have.
Correct.
Because what I didn't want was I didn't want you to feel responsible for anything that happened to me.
But I was going to feel that way anyway.
I know, but it would be easier to have the conversation if our relationship had a foundation to it.
True.
And that was the motivation behind why I didn't tell you any of that stuff at first.
Right.
And it was my intention to not tell you any of that on my first visit. But that isn't the way it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought that we had a really meaningful conversation about it. And to this day, I still appreciate that. And think about how we were able to talk through that and get to a good place.
Yeah. Yeah, because it concerned me. And I felt better after we discussed it. And the reasons why.
Yeah.
I do understand when people say, well, they don't really know what love is because they've never been exposed to it, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn. I don't care how old you are, you
Right.
learn something new every day.
Right.
And maybe if you didn't know what real love was from before, you can always tell when something's different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when something feels different. And you can always definitely tell when it feels right, or when it feels forced, or when it doesn't feel real. You can tell the difference, you know. It's up to you if you want to believe what your mind is telling you, or if you just want to still pretend. But you know.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah. And I also feel that, we have earned our relationship because we take care of it. We nurture it.
Yeah.
We talk semi-regularly.
We do.
And so when I say that I love you, it's real to me.
Yeah.
And that goes in line with how I have known love to begin with, because one of the things that we had talked about is that, since I was adopted, until I met you, I've never been related to anybody by blood
Right.
in my life. So I didn't know what that meant to love somebody just because you
You're
were
related,
biologically
yeah.
connected to them.
Yeah.
I loved people based off of getting to know them and determining from how that person made me feel about myself and what it was like to be with them. That would determine whether or not I loved that person.
Right.
So it wasn't the type of thing that I would just be able to say, oh, I love you.
Yeah.
I needed to get to know you.
Yeah, of course.
And I was committed to that.
Yeah. Well, that was evident. It really was. I mean, from the very first time I saw you, it was like, okay, you made it very easy for us to start to blend and mend, should I say, for lack of a better word. It was very easy to fit, because it could have very easily went the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate that it didn't. Very fortunate. And my children were fortunate. They've been blessed for to my other children, because Skeeter always said he knew there was something missing in his life, and he said it was you. And even though he's gone now, his memories pop up, and they're always about you. They're about Jordan and about you. He always talks about things that's most important to him.
It was very obvious that
for you to have only been in his life for the short period of time that you were there, evidently it was very, it was big. For it to stand out that it became that important to him. It was big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was something that he made very clear, that family was very important to him,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt that from him immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't shy about it at all.
Mm-mm. Never was. Never was.
Shirley lived in New Hampshire. Her husband was stationed at Pease.
Right.
And that's why you went to New Hampshire?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because it was away from, I was in school in North Carolina. I couldn't stay there. Back in the day, my mother's time, when things happened in the family, you were not seen. So it was not for me to be there, because she had to face her family peers or whatever, and I was like a single mother, whatever. So got to be out of sight, out of mind. I felt like when you're in that kind of predicament, you want to be where you got family, friends, somebody close, that if something happened, you got somebody that, would be there for you, a support system more or less. And she was my first cousin. Her mom and my mom were sisters, and even though I always tried for us to have a sister relationship from the time we were little, and I always forgave her for the craziness that she did, I still reached out to her, because she was in New Hampshire, and we crossed the map from where I was raised, So yeah, I reached out to her, And initially it worked out fine, because she was in her own crazy world, and I kind of helped her out a little bit anyway while I was there, and she was decent. She was decent. They didn't make it hard for me, and I didn't go in and lay on. I worked 2 jobs while I was there, when I was pregnant with you. I worked 2 jobs. I worked on the base, and I worked at a restaurant. So I worked 2 jobs, and I went back to school after it was over with. I didn't go back to Greenville at all. And I talked to your aunt daily on the phone, your dad's sister. I talked to him periodically, maybe once, twice a week. But I talked to his sister every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so still in that dream world, thinking things were gonna work out. Him and I were gonna hook up. We were gonna be a family. That was my own fantasy. And of course, as time goes by, reality sinks in, and you was like, well, that ain't gonna happen.
So was he indicating to you that it might, or was he saying that it wasn't?
He never said it wasn't. You know, he always said, "How's my son?" Because he always said if you were gonna be a boy, and I hadn't even had you yet. And back then they didn't tell you the sex of the baby when when they did sonograms or whatever. But he'd always say, "Well, how's my son?" And all this or whatever. And I think he just assumed that I was gonna have the baby and come back to Greenville, me and the baby or whatever. I don't know. Because back then, a lot of the band members, they was like hitting and missing everywhere, and they had babies, I guess, everywhere or whatever. And so I don't know what he assumed we were going to do. He never actually said he was going to marry me, but he acted like we were still in a relationship, And he never said that he wasn't going to marry me. And I just assumed that we were going to be together. Because I had met his sister. I told you I'd been to his sister's house. I met some of his family members and stuff and whatever before I went to school. And whenever I'd come home, whenever he'd come pick me up, I'd go visit his family with him, And I assumed that when you visit the family, that means that you supposed to be kind of special, right? Because usually a man don't take every woman he date to his house, to his family. So, but like I said, that was just me in my own fantasy world. And as I got older and smarter, and I realized that I need to quit dreaming. Because this is about to get real, real. And he ain't going to be there. So.
Can we talk a little bit about your transition back?
Sure.
Okay, so you've given birth. You've gone back. And you said you didn't go back to South Carolina. You went back to college.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, there's still very few people that know. So what did you do for support, and how were you feeling after going through that experience?
What did I do for support when I went back to school?
Yeah.
Well, my mom was still paying my school bill. She was still paying my school bill, so I didn't never have to pay that. It's just like I just had you and went back to my life like it was before I ever. Some things I didn't do. I quit cheering. It took a lot of spark out of my life. I was just there. I came back. I felt lost, to tell the truth. It was like I didn't know where I belonged anymore.
Okay.
That's the way I felt. So I didn't feel like I was the person that I was before you. And I didn't know who I was and where I belonged. And so I guess I was just kind of floating. Not knowing where I was headed, to tell the truth. For a couple of years.
And it sounds like because nobody really knew what was going on, that you had to deal with that alone.
I did. Nobody knew. My brother didn't know. That's why he was so shocked when you popped up. He didn't know. Nobody knew. My aunts, uncle, nobody knew. My mom didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew. My friends at school, nobody knew. Nobody never said, "Well, why did you come out of school and stay out a whole semester and come back?"
That's a little surprising that nobody asked that.
Nobody asked. Nobody asked. And that's what made me feel basically kind of like a non-existence. Because I thought, what if I disappeared? Would anybody not miss me? That's really what I felt like. It kind of made me withdraw for a while. It really did. Because I just didn't know where I belonged. I really didn't. Which led me to make some not so good choices after that, which is how I wound up with Skeeter's dad. But I mean, I at least I was married to him. I did marry him. That was one of your uncle's friends from high school. They went to high school together. And he always liked me, even when we was in high school, because they were a year ahead of me. And I never really liked him. I didn't. But I just felt like I needed to, I don't know what I felt like. I felt like I didn't have anybody. I felt like nobody wanted me. I felt like nobody cared what I did. I felt like nobody cared where I was or where I would go. And he meant like he loved me so much. And I told him I didn't love him. Not like that. I liked him. I went out on a date with him. I liked him, but I told him, I said, I don't love you the way somebody's supposed to love you to marry you. And he was like, that's okay. I love you enough for the both of us. And you'll learn to love me and this and that, whatever. And my attitude was, oh, well, But that was a wake-up call for me because he's very abusive. And once I got with him and I realized how he really was, and I kept saying, I'm better than this. I deserve better than this. Skeeter deserved better than this. And even though my mom was not a people person and she was never one to say I love you or hug you or nothing like that or let me help you or let me be there for you, I always heard people talk about how strong she was and, you know, how she did this on her own and did this or whatever. And I kept saying, you know, my mom didn't raise no dummies, you know, and I just felt like even if I didn't have nobody else in the world, I felt like I could do better. And I felt like that even if I didn't like her as a parent, I felt like I could learn from her as a parent. And if I did half as much as she did or better, my child would have a better life than I felt like I did. Yeah, because I didn't lack material things at all. Because we were like upper middle class. I didn't like it, but I lacked love and affection and, you know, just bonding. We didn't have a mother-daughter bond. I had a daughter-stepfather bond, but not a mother-daughter bond. And I was the baby and the only girl. We didn't have that kind of bond, you know. So I had to learn to be strong. And I had to learn to not worry about what other people thought. And I had to learn to realize that people only know what other people tell them or what you let them know about you. That if there's something about your life that you don't want nobody to know, then don't tell nobody. If you don't tell it, nobody knows. And they can't, you know. So that means people said I was really withdrawn and quiet. And I wasn't. I was just protecting myself. This is exactly what I was. I was protecting myself. So that's what I learned to do. And it made me strong. It made me strong. Sometimes it makes me too strong. But it did. It made me stronger. It made me survive. It made me have 3 boys. It made me make sure that they had what they needed. I did what I thought was best for you. Even though I couldn't physically do it myself, I wanted you to at least have a chance. I did what I could for Skeeter, and I did what I could for Ivan. Even though I had to fight their fathers and their fathers' families, I still did what I had to do. I worked. I did whatever I could. I didn't let them do it out. I would do it out myself because I felt that was my responsibility because y'all didn't ask to come here.
That's true.
You did. And it's my responsibility as your parent to do what I can, you know. So I did. You know, I put my life on hold for them. I really did. That's why now when you see me redheading and hooping and whatever, I be like, well, my kids are grown now. So I'm 74, so let me go on a cruise. You know, I never did that kind of stuff when my kids were young because they needed shoes and they needed to go to the dentist and they needed to go to school and they needed school clothes. And sometimes it was hard just to scrape up money for that kind of stuff. You know? So it's life. You learn.
Yeah.
You struggle. You fall down, you get up, you keep going.
Yeah. As long as you get up one more time and you fall down, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about or wonder about the possibility that we might meet in the future?
Yes, I did. I did. So for years, I saved a lock of your hair. I saved your feet print that they put on the birth certificate. I saved a little bracelet from your wrist. Somehow that got lost within the last year or so before we actually re-met. But I carried that from place to place. I always, and I used to wonder at night, you know, how you were, or did you survive, or did you get with a good family, and were you okay? And I wanted to know. I really did. And one time I even checked into getting an agency to see if I could possibly find you. And then I hesitated because I thought about the other 2 boys. I didn't know what it would do to them. It was my selfishness that made me do what I did, even though I felt like I was doing it what was best for you. But I never told them about you. And I said, if all of a sudden I go and find you and pull you back into the fold, you know, they looking at me like, you know, why you didn't tell us what's going on? You know, you always been honest with us. You always told us about honesty and stuff. And why you know what I'm saying? So I was like, I didn't want them to hate me. I had started believing in God by then. I had gone back to my roots and I said, you know what? I'm putting this in God's hand. If it's meant to be, somehow we'll find a way back to each other. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I said somehow we'll find a way back. And I just left it at that. So when I got the first call, I was shocked and elated, I must say. All kind of emotions, just, but I didn't know what to do. And then I wondered, I said, I'm wondering, is it really true? Or is it somebody who's pretending? Because that's been an issue with some folks. They find out they have children everywhere and somewhere else, and the child find out that this person is whoever, and they like, well, that's somebody I can take advantage of, whatever. And I was like, well, I wonder, is it true? And I had doubts until I got that letter with your picture. And when I opened the letter and the picture fell out and I saw Ivan fall out in my lap, I said, this is real. I saw Ivan fall in my lap.
Yeah, my younger brother.
Yeah, I saw Ivan fall in my lap. And that was it for me.
Different fathers,
Yeah.
but we look
Yeah.
so much alike.
That was it for me. I knew then. I said, that's him.
We'll go back to, I think it was 2016. You're on your way to the bed and breakfast where Emily and I are staying. We're gonna meet face to face for the first time. What's going through your mind?
I was petrified. Mainly because I didn't want you to hate me, and I didn't really know how you was feeling. And even though you have a very calming voice on the phone, very soothing, not knowing you, I don't know if that's real or not.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm usually a pretty good judge of character about people as long as they're not personally involved with me. Because being personally involved with people sometimes will give you blinders.
Yep.
So I wanted to see you, but I was petrified. I'm just be honest, I was terrified, But when I saw you for the first time, even before we hugged, I looked at your face and I said, that's Ivan. Just all I saw was Ivan. And I knew Ivan was a gentle soul, and so that made me think that your voice was who you really were. And I said, he may hate me, but he can't hate me forever. If that makes sense.
That was a scary moment. It really was. I mean, I believed that you wanted to meet, but I still didn't know what to expect. And, for me, it was wondering whether or not you were going to like me.
How could I not?
Stranger things have happened.
Well, that's true.
So, I think that we both were experiencing similar emotions about that moment, because
But you could tell looking at your
the
face.
first thing.
You could not tell that looking at your face. You were just sitting there like, okay, here I am, mother. And I was like, oh my God. That's all I could say. Oh my God.
Yeah. What would you say is a thing that you didn't know about me before that surprised you the most?
Well, actually, I didn't know anything about you from before. And I'm not really surprised about anything about you because you're an open book. Basically, you are who you say you are because your actions show that. I do like the fact that you are very considerate of other people's feelings. And so you ask questions before you make moves that you think might interfere with somebody else's life or cause them maybe some ill will or some upsets or whatever. You'll say, well, okay, I have a scenario. This is what's come up, you know. I'm doing this, this, and this came up. And so I was wanting to do this, but not if it's gonna cause you any stress. What do you think? Now, I like that, but everybody don't do that. Because usually when people are out for self gratification, they're trying to figure out what it is they want out of life. They're not concerned with what somebody else want or care about or whatever. They're gonna do whatever they need to do to satisfy their own wants and needs. So you take other people into consideration, and it's not just me because I'm your mother. You do that with everybody, you know. But that's the kind of spirit that Ivan has too. So that's why when you do stuff you do, I'm not surprised because even though I don't know you, I know you. Because when I know Ivan, I know you. Y'all just alike, whether you know it or not. Y'all are. Y'all are so much alike. Skeeter said, Mama, don't be shocked. You need to realize they have different fathers, but they got the same mother. And you have strong genes. That's why all of us are the way we are. And he's correct. Y'all are more like me than you are your fathers. I'm just sorry. That's what it is.
Now that we have the relationship that we do, can you talk a little bit about how your life has changed?
Since we've known each other, my life is fulfilled now. I'm always talking about how I'm a senior citizen, this, that, whatever. That ain't really true, but you know. I am, you know, because I tell you for a while I was kind of like lost, not knowing where I was going, where my life was headed. And even though I'd been married again and had other children and was doing the right things I thought to raise them or whatever, I still was not like fulfilled. I'm at a point in my life now, I'm not ready to die. But if I do, I'm okay with it. Because I finally feel like I'm fulfilled. You know, I have my family back, in a sense. Even though Skeeter's gone now, he's still with us. You know, and he got to experience his older brother, which fulfilled him before he left here. And I know that that was good for him. So I'm fulfilled in that sense. And my life is really good now. I'm sure it could be a lot better in some cases, and maybe that's some things I don't want that other people do want or whatever, but I'm really quite contented. I really am. I know some people probably thought, well, I don't know who she thinks she is. I'm happy. I got 3 boys. I love them. I'm happy. I got grandchildren that I love. I even accept yours because you raised them, so he like mine too. I know that just amazes him because I contact him. He just like he mine too. He yours, so why not? So I'm happy. I really am happy. I am. I'm fulfilled.
That's excellent.
I could say the same for you. You could answer that same question for me. So
That's where I was going to go next. Do you have any questions for me? So let's start there. You know, there's been a long period of time where there's always been somebody in my life that has wanted me to connect with my biological family. And the primary reason that I started that search is because I was getting older and I was afraid that if I waited until I was comfortable, that I'd wait too long. And I didn't want to do that. And connecting with you, building a relationship with you, building a relationship with Ivan and his family, being able to connect with Skeeter, changed me in a way that I didn't expect. And I like to plan for things and feel like I know what's going to happen and be ready for that. But it changed me in ways that I wasn't expecting, and they're all good. I feel like there is a legitimacy to my past now that didn't exist before. I feel a connectivity to my heritage that I've been undercutting through most of my adult life. The things that I've read about weren't just of historical significance. They're part of my family now.
yeah,
I didn't count on any of that. So it was pretty impactful to me. Once we started connecting and we started talking and you started sharing information with me, even the connections that I made on my father's side of the family, hearing things from them, it just sort of reinforced that, and it was powerful. It really was. There are zero regrets about this being the right thing to have done. And, you know, it's interesting. You had concerns about how it was going to impact Skeeter and Ivan, and that was a barrier for you, so you put it in God's hands. I had my reluctancy about doing it. So there's a possibility that because both of us were trying to be considerate of those that were around us, that we might not have connected at all.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Thank God for a higher power. That's all I can say.
it ended up working out, and I couldn't be happier about that.
I'm even happy that some of your dad's people reach out and wanted to know you. You know, I thought that was just magnificent. I can't speak for him. I don't know what's going on in his life. He even denies me at this point. He says he don't remember us ever having an election. That's the scariest thing I've heard in my life. But anyway, it just amazes me that he would go to that extent. And maybe when people don't really mean anything to you, they just like ships to pass the night, maybe you do forget about them. And I thought, ooh, I did not know I was that insignificant, but evidently I was, you know. So, but it was nice to know that his family, because I'm sure, I know he has other children. You know he has other children. And we don't know how many others he got that we don't even know about. And I'm sure his family has seen women coming up saying, oh, yeah, you know, Lil's my baby dad and all that kind of stuff. And I for them to reach out to you, you know, to me was like, I was like, okay, this God at work. He was like, okay, I need to mend this family some kind of way. And since you don't have your dad, you got your dad's people. That's just as good. So you got people on, but I said to myself, now I'm wondering. I know he said, I grew up not knowing who I was, where I came from, who I belong to, what I'm about, how I got here. And I wake up the next day and I got a whole tribe of relatives that I never knew about. They're just coming out the woodworks now, you know, but that's just the way life is, you know. But the good part about it is you got good tribes coming out the woodwork. Everything's been good. Everything's been good. I couldn't even get mad about them coming to visit you when I should have been, but I wasn't. Because they didn't do anything to me. It's not their fault their brother didn't want to hook up with me. And I think it's wonderful they wanted to know their nephew. So I couldn't even be mad about that.
Yeah. I do feel blessed because everybody's been welcoming,
Yeah.
you know, and they don't have to be.
Yeah, that's true. They really didn't have, because like I said, I'm sure some other ones running around here telling me, yeah, that's my baby dad. And they was like, girl, you need to go on with that. You know, 'cause you know how they say, mama's baby daddy, maybe he probably got a whole bunch of, but they accepted you, you know, and they didn't have to do that. So I thank them for that. Even though we had enough love on this side that if they hadn't, it would have been okay, because we loved you anyway. But I'm glad they did. I'm glad they did. So.